The vast window of Space Station Liberty stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a breathtaking view of Earth below. Amanda Harris stood there for a moment, her 6-year-old daughter Lisa's small hand wrapped tightly in hers. The blue marble of their home planet hung against the backdrop of endless stars, making Lisa gasp in wonder. "Mommy, it's so pretty," Lisa said, pressing her free hand against the transparent metal. Her dark eyes sparkled with excitement, matching the stars beyond the window. Amanda smiled down at her daughter, adjusting the collar of Lisa's best dress, the one with little rockets and stars printed on blue fabric. "It sure is, sweetheart. And tonight is special. We're going to eat at the fanciest restaurant on the station." They had been living on Space Station Liberty for 3 months now, ever since Amanda had accepted the position as lead terraforming engineer. The job was prestigious, the kind of opportunity that could define a career. More importantly, it offered Lisa a chance to grow up among the stars, just as Amanda had dreamed of doing when she was young. The corridors of the station's upper levels gleamed with polish, their white walls decorated with artistic holograms showing scenes from various worlds. Amanda's boots clicked against the floor as they walked, the sound mixing with the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Other station residents, humans and aliens alike, passed by them, some nodding in greeting, others hurrying past with the purposeful stride of people with somewhere important to be. Lisa pointed at a tall, crystalline being that glided past them. "Look, Mommy, they're sparkling." "That's a crystalline elder," Amanda explained, keeping her voice low. "They're from a planet where everything is made of living crystal. That's why I'm working so hard on their new colony world, to make sure the mineral content is just right for them." They reached the entrance to Stellar Views, the station's premier restaurant. The establishment's name floated in elegant holographic letters above the door, shifting through various alien alphabets. Through the entrance, Amanda could see tables occupied by a mix of humans and alien species, all dining together under soft, star-like lights that floated near the ceiling. Amanda straightened her back, conscious of her formal suit, the nicest one she owned, bought specially for important occasions on the station. She had made the reservation 2 weeks ago, wanting everything to be perfect for Lisa's first time at a fancy restaurant. "Remember what we talked about?" Amanda asked, kneeling down to Lisa's level. "This is a fancy place, so we use our best manners." Lisa nodded solemnly. Inside voice, "Please and thank you, and no running." She recited the rules carefully, then broke into a grin. "And you said they have real ice cream from Earth." "That's right, sweetheart." Amanda stood up and approached the host's podium, where a thin man with graying hair stood reviewing something on his tablet. His name tag read Mr. Peters. "Good evening," Amanda said warmly. "Reservation for Harris, party of 2." Mr. Peters looked up, and Amanda saw the moment his expression changed. It was subtle, a slight tightening around his eyes, a barely noticeable downturn of his mouth. But Amanda knew that look. She had seen it countless times before, even here on humanity's most advanced space station. "Harris," he repeated, making a show of checking his tablet. His fingers moved across the screen in a way that told Amanda he wasn't really looking at anything. "I'm not seeing any reservation under that name." Amanda kept her voice steady, conscious of Lisa still holding her hand. "I made it 2 weeks ago. I have the confirmation right here." She lifted her own tablet, displaying the official reservation notification. Mr. Peters barely glanced at it. There must have been a system error. "Unfortunately, we're fully booked tonight." He gestured around the restaurant, where Amanda could clearly see several empty tables. Lisa's grip on her hand tightened. "But Mommy, you promised." Amanda squeezed her daughter's hand reassuringly, even as she felt a familiar weight settle in her stomach. She had hoped things would be different here, 300 miles above Earth's surface, surrounded by beings from dozens of different worlds. But some things, it seemed, followed humanity even into the stars. "I can pull up the confirmation on the station's official booking system," Amanda said, keeping her voice calm and professional. She typed quickly on her tablet, accessing the station's public records. Behind her, she could hear the whispers starting. Mr. Peters' face tightened. He glanced past Amanda at a group of well-dressed diners who were watching the exchange with obvious interest. They wore the distinctive rings of Earth's old merchant families, golden bands with tiny blue diamonds that marked them as members of the Trade Council. "Perhaps you misunderstood the type of establishment this is," Mr. Peters said, lowering his voice. "Stellar Views caters to a certain caliber of guest. The station's cafeteria on level 3 might be more suitable for you and your daughter." Lisa tugged at Amanda's sleeve. "Monty, why is the man being mean?" A few nearby aliens turned their heads at Lisa's words. A crystalline elder at a corner table caught Amanda's eye, its faceted surface reflecting the starlight in rainbow patterns. The alien's crystalline structure shifted slightly, a sign that Amanda recognized as concern from her work with their species. "I understand perfectly what kind of establishment this is," Amanda replied, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby. "I'm the lead terraforming engineer for the station's colonial development project. My work directly supports half the species dining here tonight." Mr. Peters' face flushed. "Nevertheless, we have certain standards. Is there a problem here?" A new voice interrupted. Amanda turned to see a young waitress approaching, her name tag reading Jane. She had kind eyes and wore her dark hair in a neat bun, her uniform crisp and professional. "No problem at all," Mr. Peters said quickly. "I was just explaining to these people that we're fully booked." Jane frowned, looking at her own tablet. "That's strange. I just set up table 12 by the window, and I can clearly see their reservation in the system." She turned to Amanda and Lisa with a warm smile. "Mrs. Harris, right? The terraforming engineer. I saw your presentation last week about the new colony world for the crystalline elders. It was fascinating." The Trade Council members at their table began to whisper more loudly. One of them, a man with expensive cybernetic enhancements glinting at his temples, stood up. "Peters, we've discussed this sort of thing before. The ambience of this establishment is exactly what the station's charter promises," Jane interrupted firmly. "A place where all species can enjoy Earth cuisine together." She gestured to Amanda and Lisa. "Please, follow me to your table. It has a wonderful view of the approaching supply ships." Mr. Peters stepped forward, his face now an ugly shade of red. "Jane, you don't have the authority." "Actually, I do," Jane said, her smile never wavering. "The owner made it very clear that all confirmed reservations are to be honored. It's station law." She emphasized the last two words just enough to make Mr. Peters step back. As Jane led them through the restaurant, Amanda could feel the stares. Some were hostile, particularly from the Trade Council members, but others seemed curious or supportive. The crystalline elder they passed hummed a soft note of greeting, a sound Amanda recognized from her work as a sign of respect. Lisa's eyes went wide as they reached their table. It was right next to one of the huge windows, offering a spectacular view of space. A supply ship was indeed approaching, its running lights twinkling like moving stars. "Your table," Jane said, pulling out chairs for both of them. "Today's special is real beef stew from Earth, and yes," she winked at Lisa, "we do have ice cream for dessert." Amanda helped Lisa into her chair, noticing how her daughter's earlier distress had been replaced by excitement at the view. But she could still hear the murmurs behind them, could feel Mr. Peters watching from his podium, with barely concealed anger. This evening, she realized, was far from over. But as she watched Lisa press her nose against the window, pointing at the supply ship with pure joy, Amanda knew she would face whatever came next. She hadn't worked her way up to lead engineer, hadn't crossed the gulf of space itself, to let anyone make her daughter feel unwelcome among the stars. Jane moved efficiently between tables, keeping one eye on Amanda and Lisa's table near the window. In her 3 years working at Stellar Views, she had seen plenty of Mr. Peters' selective seating practices, but something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way Lisa's eyes lit up at the view, or how Amanda carried herself with quiet dignity despite the continued whispers. As she approached their table with water glasses, she heard Lisa asking, "Mommy, what's that big ring around the supply ship?" "That's its gravity drive," Amanda explained, her voice gentle and patient. "It helps the ship move through space faster than regular rockets." Jane set down their waters, adding a small paper umbrella to Lisa's glass. The little girl's face brightened at the decoration. "The umbrellas are usually for special drinks," Jane said with a wink, "but I think every drink should be special for brave young space explorers." "Thank you," Amanda said softly, and Jane could hear layers of meaning in those two words. From across the restaurant, Jane noticed Mr. Peters talking in hushed tones with the trade council members. She had seen that particular group before. They came in every week, always demanding the same table, always causing trouble for anyone they deemed unsuitable. Their cybernetic implants glinted as they gestured, their faces showing clear displeasure. Jane pulled out her order tablet, purposefully positioning herself to block their view of Amanda's table. "Have you had a chance to look at the menu? The beef stew is amazing, but my personal favorite is the salmon. We get it fresh from the hydroponic farms on level 7. Lisa bounced in her seat. "Can I have the star-shaped chicken nuggets?" "Please, Mommy." Jane watched Amanda scan the menu prices, noting the slight tightening around her eyes. "The children's menu items come with a free dessert tonight," Jane added smoothly. "Part of our special station celebration." It wasn't true, but Jane would pay the difference herself if she had to. She had seen the news feeds about Amanda's work, how she had solved the complex problem of creating viable environments for multiple alien species on the same colony world. That breakthrough had saved billions in construction costs and made interspecies colonies possible for the first time. "The chicken nuggets sound perfect," Amanda said, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "And I'll try the salmon you recommended." As Jane turned to place their order, she saw the crystalline elder from the corner table rise from its seat. The crystalline being moved with fluid grace toward Amanda's table, its faceted surface catching and reflecting the starlight. Other diners fell silent, watching. The elder stopped at their table and spoke, its voice a melodious chime that the station's translation system converted to words. "Engineer Harris, it is an honor. Your work on our colony world's mineral matrix will save many of our young ones from fading. Please, allow me to pay for your meal as a small token of our gratitude." Before Amanda could respond, one of the trade council members stood up abruptly. "This is outrageous. First, we have to tolerate them in here, and now we have to watch aliens making a spectacle." Jane moved quickly to the kitchen terminal, sending a discreet message to station security. She had already documented Mr. Peters' discrimination, recording every incident over the past year. But the trade council members were another matter. They had power, connections that reached all the way back to Earth. Through the kitchen window, she could see more alien diners taking notice of the situation. A group of atmospheric gas brothers, their containment suits gleaming, turned their sensors toward the commotion. Two insectoid diplomats clicked their mandibles in what Jane recognized as signs of agitation. What had started as a simple dinner was rapidly becoming something much bigger. Jane touched the small recorder pin on her collar, a gift from her father, who served on the station's security force. She had learned long ago that the best weapon against prejudice was evidence. "Your order will be ready soon," Jane said cheerfully as she passed by Amanda's table again, trying to project calm. But she could feel the tension building in the restaurant like pressure in an airlock. Something had to give, and soon. The trade council member with cybernetic implants, who had introduced himself loudly as Director Reynolds, was now standing at his table, his voice carrying across the restaurant. "This establishment used to have standards," he announced, his enhanced eyes glowing faintly blue with anger. "Now look at it. It's becoming no better than a level 3 cafeteria." Amanda tried to focus on helping Lisa cut her star-shaped chicken nuggets into smaller pieces, but she could feel the man's artificial gaze boring into her back. The crystalline elder had returned to its seat after Amanda had politely declined its offer to pay, not wanting to escalate the situation further. "Mommy," Lisa whispered, her small hands trembling slightly as she held her fork. "Why is that man so angry? Did we do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart," Amanda said firmly, though her heart ached at the worry in her daughter's eyes. "We didn't do anything wrong. Some people just have trouble accepting that space is big enough for everyone." Director Reynolds wasn't finished. He walked toward their table, his expensive shoes clicking against the floor. Two other trade council members followed him, their golden rings glinting under the star-like lights. "Peters," he called out, "I believe it's time to enforce the dress code policy." Mr. Peters hurried over, looking almost gleeful. "Of course, Director Reynolds. I noticed it myself." He turned to Amanda. "Ma'am, I'm afraid your attire doesn't meet our standards. You'll have to leave." Amanda looked down at her formal suit, the same style worn by several other diners in the restaurant. "This suit cost me 3 months' savings," she said quietly. "It meets all listed dress code requirements." "The requirements have changed," Mr. Peters said smugly. "As of today." From nearby tables, other diners were beginning to react. The insectoid diplomats were making rapid clicking sounds to each other, their antennae twitching in what Amanda recognized as signs of distress. The atmospheric gas breathers had turned their sensors to full record mode, the lights on their suits blinking rapidly. "I can show you the station's commerce regulations," Amanda began, reaching for her tablet, but Director Reynolds cut her off. "We don't need to see your regulations," he sneered. "This is a private establishment. We can refuse service to anyone who disrupts the atmosphere." His cybernetic eyes flashed. "And you are definitely disrupting the atmosphere." Lisa's lower lip began to tremble. One of her star-shaped nuggets fell from her fork, landing on the pristine white tablecloth. The small stain it left seemed to enrage Mr. Peters further. "Look at that. No proper manners at all," he declared. "This is exactly what we were afraid would happen." Jane appeared suddenly, smoothly placing herself between Director Reynolds and their table. "I have your salmon, Mrs. Harris," she said loudly, setting down the plate. "And look, Lisa, the chef made your nuggets extra crispy, just like you wanted." "This doesn't concern you, girl," Director Reynolds snapped at Jane. "Know your place." "My place," Jane said calmly, "is serving our guests. All of our guests." She emphasized the word all while pressing something on her collar, a small pin that Amanda now noticed was blinking with a red light. More diners were watching now. The crystalline elder had begun to hum at a frequency that made the water glasses vibrate slightly. The atmospheric gas breathers had risen from their seats, their containment suits whirring as they moved closer. "This is your last warning," Mr. Peters said, trying to sound authoritative despite the growing tension in the room. "Leave now, or we'll be forced to call security." "Please do," Jane said, her voice steady. "I'm sure they'll be very interested in reviewing today's security footage, especially the parts about selectively enforcing dress codes." Lisa's eyes were wide with fear now, darting between the angry faces surrounding their table. Amanda reached across to hold her daughter's hand, feeling it shake in her grip. The salmon on her plate sat untouched, growing cold as the confrontation heated up. Amanda stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor in the tense silence that had fallen over the restaurant. She was tall. Years of working in variable gravity environments had given her good posture, and she drew herself up to her full height. "No," she said simply. "We won't leave." Director Reynolds' cybernetic eyes flickered in surprise. Few people ever dared to stand up to the Trade Council. "Excuse me." "I said no." Amanda's voice was clear and steady. Station Charter, Section 12, Paragraph 3. No establishment open to the public may discriminate based on species, planet of origin, or physical appearance. I helped write that section when we were establishing the terraforming protocols. Lisa grabbed her mother's hand tightly, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. The sight of her daughter crying ignited something deep inside Amanda. "My daughter," she continued, her voice growing stronger, deserves to see the stars just as much as anyone else. She deserves to eat in this restaurant, to dream about traveling to other worlds, to make friends with beings from across the galaxy. And I will not teach her to back down from bullies, whether they're on Earth or among the stars. The atmospheric gas brothers had moved closer, their containment suits humming. One of them spoke through their translator. "We support Engineer Harris. Her work on atmospheric stabilization made our new colony possible. Our children breathe free because of her." Mr. Peters looked uncertain now, glancing between Director Reynolds and the growing number of alien diners who were standing up. The crystalline elder's humming had grown louder, creating a resonance that made the window vibrate slightly. "This is outrageous." Director Reynolds sputtered. "The Trade Council will hear about this. We'll have your license revoked, Peters." "Go ahead," Jane said, still standing protectively near Amanda and Lisa's table. "Call them. I'm sure they'll be very interested in seeing my recordings of how you treat paying customers. I wonder what the Galactic Commerce Board would think about Trade Council members violating the station charter." Lisa's tears had turned to hiccups now, and Amanda knelt down beside her daughter's chair. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "Remember what I told you about being brave?" Lisa nodded, wiping her eyes. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," she recited. "It means doing the right thing even when you are scared." The insectoid diplomats had begun a low clicking sound that their translator rendered as, "The child speaks wisdom. We too know of such courage." More alien diners were standing now. A group of bioluminescent beings near the back had started glowing brighter, their natural defense mechanism responding to the tension. Their light cast moving shadows across the restaurant's walls. "I will not leave," Amanda repeated, one arm around Lisa, the other hand resting on the table. "My daughter and I have every right to be here. And if you want us to go, you'll have to call station security and explain to them exactly why you're ejecting a senior engineering officer and her child from a public restaurant." The station's artificial day cycle was shifting toward evening, making the stars outside the window grow brighter. Against that backdrop, Amanda could see their reflections in the transparent metal. Herself, standing tall. Lisa, small but sitting up straighter now. Jane, positioned protectively nearby. And the growing group of alien diners who had risen to support them. Mr. Peters had started sweating, his earlier smugness replaced by growing panic as he realized how badly he had miscalculated. Director Reynolds' cybernetic implants were flashing rapidly, a sign of heightened emotional state that the expensive technology couldn't quite hide. "This isn't over," Director Reynolds growled, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. "The Trade Council doesn't forget insults." "Neither do we," the atmospheric gas brothers announced in unison, their translator making the words sound like a promise. Jane's fingers moved quickly over her communication device as she stepped away from the confrontation. The small recorder pin on her collar was still blinking red, capturing everything. She had already sent an emergency signal to station security, but now she added another call to the Galactic Equal Rights Commission's local office. The restaurant's doors slid open with a soft hiss. 2 station security officers walked in, their blue uniforms neat and their expressions professional. Jane recognized one of them, Officer Tom Martinez, her father's partner. "We received reports of a disturbance," Officer Martinez said, his eyes scanning the room and taking in the scene. Amanda standing protectively near Lisa, the angry Trade Council members, the various alien species who had risen in support, and Mr. Peters looking increasingly nervous. Director Reynolds straightened his expensive jacket. "Yes, indeed. These people are disrupting our dinner. We demand they be removed." "These people," a new voice said from the doorway, "include our station's lead terraforming engineer and several distinguished alien diplomats." Everyone turned to see Commissioner Helen Woods of the Galactic Equal Rights Commission entering the restaurant. Her dark skin gleamed under the starlights, and her official badge projected a small hologram of her credentials. "Commissioner," Mr. Peters stammered. We didn't expect. Clearly not. Commissioner Woods cut him off. Jane's alert mentioned something about selective enforcement of dress codes. She looked pointedly at Amanda's formal suit, which was identical to what several other diners were wearing. The atmospheric gas breathers moved their containment suits forward as one. Their spokesman's translator crackled. "We will testify to the discrimination we have witnessed. Engineer Harris and her child were treated with disrespect, despite their significant contributions to our communities." Lisa, who had been quiet during all of this, suddenly spoke up. "The angry man said we don't belong here," she said, her voice small but clear. "But Mommy helps build homes for everyone. Isn't that good?" Commissioner Woods knelt down to Lisa's level. "Yes, sweetheart, that's very good. Your mommy helps make the galaxy better for everyone." She stood back up, her expression hardening as she turned to face Director Reynolds and Mr. Peters. "And discrimination has no place in that galaxy." One of the security officers had pulled out a data pad. "We have multiple violations of Station Charter Section 12 recorded here. The fines are substantial." He looked at Director Reynolds. "And the Trade Council's license to operate on this station requires strict adherence to anti-discrimination laws." The crystalline elder moved forward, its crystalline surface refracting the light in patterns that the station's cultural database interpreted as extreme disapproval. "We will also be filing a formal complaint with the Trade Council's Ethics Board. Engineer Harris's work is vital to our species' survival. This treatment of her is unacceptable." Director Reynolds' cybernetic eyes dimmed slightly, a sign that even his expensive implants couldn't hide his growing realization of how badly this situation had turned against him. The other Trade Council members had already started edging toward the door. "I suggest," Commissioner Woods said firmly, "that you all leave now. We'll be conducting a full investigation of this establishment's practices." She turned to Jane. "Thank you for your quick action. We've been watching this place for a while, but needed clear evidence." Mr. Peters had gone pale. But the restaurant will be under new management." Commissioner Woods finished. She looked at Jane thoughtfully. "Perhaps someone who understands that a restaurant among the stars should welcome everyone who wishes to share a meal here." The security officers moved to escort the Trade Council members out. As they left, the alien diners began to settle back into their seats. The bioluminescent beings dimmed their glow, and the crystalline elder's hum softened to a more pleasant frequency. Jane watched as Amanda hugged Lisa tightly, both of them finally relaxing. Outside the window, the stars continued to shine, indifferent to the small dramas playing out before them, yet somehow seeming to twinkle a bit more brightly than before. Commissioner Woods sat at what had been Director Reynolds' table, reviewing the security footage on her tablet. The restaurant was quieter now, though most of the alien diners had chosen to stay, creating a protective atmosphere around Amanda and Lisa's table. "Jane," the commissioner called. "Can you come look at this?" She turned the tablet to show footage from the past month. "Your recordings caught more than just tonight's incident." Jane leaned in to watch. The footage showed multiple instances of Mr. Peters turning away different families, human and alien, always with the same false smile and excuses about lost reservations or dress codes. Each time, it happened when the Trade Council members were present. "There's a pattern," Jane said, pointing to the dates. "Every week when the Trade Council had their regular dinner, suddenly we'd have problems with certain reservations." The security officers were interviewing the alien diners, their data pads filling with witness statements. Officer Martinez paused by Amanda's table, where Lisa had finally returned to eating her star-shaped chicken nuggets, though she kept hold of her mother's hand. "Mrs. Harris," he said gently, "we found something interesting in the station's communication logs. It seems Director Reynolds tried to block your appointment as lead engineer 6 months ago. He failed. But he's been watching for a chance to cause trouble." Amanda finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. "That's why he was so angry to see us here." The crystalline elder glided over, its crystalline surface pulsing with soft light. "We have accessed our diplomatic archives." It chimed through the translator. The Trade Council attempted to prevent the formation of mixed species colonies. They claimed it would be too difficult to create environments suitable for multiple species. Until Mom solved it, Lisa said proudly, some of her usual spark returning. She told me she worked really hard to make sure everyone could have a home. Commissioner Woods nodded, still scrolling through the footage. And that success threatened their control over colonial development. They stood to lose billions in contracts. She looked up at Amanda. You made it possible for species to work together instead of competing for separate colonies. Not everyone was happy about that. One of the atmospheric gas brothers approached, their containment suit whirring softly. We have transmitted records of similar discrimination at other Trade Council-affiliated establishments. This appears to be a systematic attempt to maintain their power by preventing cooperation between species. Jane's recorder pin was still collecting evidence as she moved between tables, serving drinks and food to the remaining guests. She watched Mr. Peters sitting in a corner, his face ashen as he realized just how much trouble he was in. The other Trade Council members had not returned. Look at this, Commissioner Woods said suddenly, enlarging the section of the security feed. The footage showed Director Reynolds meeting secretly with Mr. Peters a week ago, passing him something that looked like a credit chip. Bribery on top of discrimination. The Trade Council's Ethics Board will be very interested in this. Lisa tugged at her mother's sleeve. Mommy, does this mean the mean people won't bother us anymore? Amanda hugged her daughter close. It means that when people do wrong things, there are others who will stand up to help make it right. The insectoid diplomats had been conferring among themselves, their antennae waving in complex patterns. Their translator spoke. We propose a formal commendation for Jane and Engineer Harris. Their courage honors the principles our station was built upon. Outside the window, the supply ship that had caught Lisa's attention earlier was now docking, its gravity drive powering down in a beautiful display of shifting energy fields. The sight seemed to symbolize the changes happening inside the restaurant. Old power structures giving way to new connections, old prejudices falling apart in the face of unity. The restaurant's owner arrived within the hour. Unlike Mr. Peters or the Trade Council members, Mr. Zhang was a short, elderly man who had lived on various space stations for most of his life. His eyes widened as he took in the scene. Commissioner Woods reviewing evidence, security officers taking statements, and the diverse group of aliens still gathered in support of Amanda and Lisa. I was on a shuttle from Earth when I got the emergency message, Mr. Zhang said, his voice tired but firm. I never authorized any discriminatory policies. This restaurant was meant to be a place where Earth cuisine could bring different species together. Mr. Peters, still sitting in his corner, tried to speak up. Sir, I was only trying to maintain the establishment's standards. Standards? Mr. Zhang interrupted, his voice sharp. My parents were restaurant owners on Earth who faced discrimination themselves. They taught me that good food and respect go hand in hand. He turned to face Commissioner Woods. I want to make this right. The commissioner nodded, pulling up a document on her tablet. We've prepared some immediate actions that need to be taken. First, Mr. Peters is to be removed from his position, effective immediately. Mr. Peters slumped in his chair, all his former arrogance gone. Officer Martinez stepped forward. We'll also need him to come to the security office for questioning about those payments from Director Reynolds. Second, Commissioner Woods continued, the Trade Council's weekly reservation block is canceled. Those tables will be made available to all customers on a first-come, first-served basis. The atmospheric gas brothers spokesman added through their translator. Our diplomatic council will ensure this news reaches all species on the station. The Trade Council's attempt to control this space has failed. Mr. Zhang walked over to Amanda and Lisa's table, bowing deeply. Engineer Harris, I offer my sincere apologies for how you and your daughter were treated. Your work has made it possible for so many species to live together in harmony. This restaurant should reflect that same spirit. Lisa, who had been watching everything with wide eyes, asked, Does this mean we can come back again? Of course, Mr. Zhang smiled, then looked thoughtful. In fact, he turned to Jane, who was still moving efficiently between tables despite all the excitement. Young lady, your actions tonight showed exactly the kind of principles this restaurant needs. How would you like to be our new manager? Jane stopped, nearly dropping her serving tray in surprise. Me? But I'm just a waitress. The crystalline elder's voice chimed in. You showed courage and wisdom in standing up for what is right. Those are the qualities of a true leader. I agree, Mr. Zhang said. We need someone who understands that a restaurant can be more than just a place to eat. It can be a place where boundaries break down and understanding grows. Commissioner Woods looked up from her tablet. It would certainly help with our rehabilitation plan for the establishment. Having management committed to equal treatment is essential. Amanda reached out and squeezed Jane's hand. You protected us when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Lisa and I would definitely feel safe coming here with you in charge. Jane looked around at all the faces watching her. Human, crystalline, gaseous, insectoid, and bioluminescent, all united in this moment. I would be honored, she finally said. Excellent, Mr. Zhang declared. And your first official act can be to ensure that Mrs. Harris and Lisa's dinner is on the house tonight. Lisa clapped her hands excitedly. Can I still have ice cream? The whole restaurant seemed to laugh at that, the tension of the earlier confrontation finally breaking completely. Even the security officers smiled. Outside the window, the stars continued their eternal dance, witnesses to this small but significant victory for understanding among species. 3 months after the incident at Stellar Views, the restaurant had transformed. Under Jane's management, the once exclusive establishment had become a symbol of unity on Space Station Liberty. The waiting list for tables grew longer each week, but Jane made sure there was always room for families with children, regardless of their species. Amanda stood at the familiar window, watching Lisa chat excitedly with a young crystalline being. The alien child's facets sparkled as they compared notes on their favorite star-shaped foods. Lisa loved her chicken nuggets, while the crystalline child preferred mineral clusters shaped like constellations. They're getting along well, Jane said, approaching with a fresh glass of water. She had kept her waitress apron, choosing to serve tables herself several times a week despite being manager. It's becoming a common sight here now. Indeed, the restaurant had become a meeting place for families from different worlds. At one table, an atmospheric gas breather was teaching their child how to properly adjust their containment suit's dining attachment. At another, an insectoid family clicked happily over their specially prepared earth vegetables. The station council asked me to speak at next week's assembly, Amanda said, still watching Lisa. They want to expand the anti-discrimination protocols to all stations in the sector. Apparently, what happened here sparked some important conversations. The Trade Council had faced serious consequences. Director Reynolds and his associates had lost their positions after investigations revealed years of discriminatory practices and attempted sabotage of interspecies cooperation. Their replacements were a diverse group committed to fair trading practices. Mom, Lisa called out, running over with her crystalline friend close behind. Can we show them the terraforming videos? The ones about how you make places where everyone can live together. Amanda smiled. After the incident, she had started creating child-friendly explanations of her work, helping young ones from all species understand how their environments were connected. The videos had become surprisingly popular across the station. Engineer Harris, a familiar chiming voice called. The original crystalline elder who had supported them that night approached, its surface glowing warmly. The first families have begun moving into the mixed species colony. The mineral matrix you designed is performing perfectly. Children of 5 different species are already playing together in the common areas. Jane beamed with pride. The restaurant had hosted the Colony Project's celebration dinner last week. She had made sure to serve dishes from every species culture, adapted to be safe for all dietary needs. Look what I made. Lisa held up a drawing she'd been working on. It showed the restaurant's window, But instead of just stars outside, she had drawn beings of all shapes and sizes holding hands in a circle around the station. The artistic skill might have been childish, but the message was clear. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Amanda said, kneeling down to look closer. "Would you like to hang it up here at the restaurant?" "Can we?" Lisa looked at Jane hopefully. "Of course. I know just the spot." Jane led them to a wall that had once held expensive artwork chosen by Mr. Peters. Now it displayed children's drawings from dozens of species, all showing their visions of life among the stars. As they hung up Lisa's picture, the station's day cycle began to shift toward evening. The stars outside grew brighter, just as they had on that pivotal night. But now they shone on a very different scene. A restaurant full of diverse beings, sharing meals, stories, and friendship. "You know," Amanda said softly to Jane, watching Lisa return to her new friend, "that night could have gone very differently if you hadn't stood up for us." Jane shook her head. "All I did was help the truth come out. You were the one who stood your ground." She smiled as a group of new customers entered, a mixed family of humans and bioluminescent beings. But look what happened because we all stood together. Outside the window, a new colony ship was preparing to depart. Its gravity drive created ripples of light against the stars, carrying more families toward homes where they could all live together, their differences making them stronger rather than keeping them apart.